So, this has kind of been going through the mind these past few days, and it's kind of something I've been wanting to discuss for some time, but I knew it was going to take a little bit of effort to do some visual aids. So, we're going to try something a little different today. This topic has to do with this process of expansion that we're all going through right now, and it's happening at an individual level, which we're all experiencing, but at the same time, it's also happening at a cosmic level. What's happening to us as individuals right now is also happening to planets, it's happening to stars, solar systems, the entire universe itself. Basically, all of creation right now is actually going up in vibration. It's a vibrational shift in itself. Um, Depending on how you look at it, one could say one is causing the other, vice versa, but it's all relative. The point is the process itself is happening. Why it's happening doesn't really matter. Um, but without knowing what's happening, it's it can be very it could be an experience to say the least. Think about it this way, okay? With modern day technology, we can see a hurricane when it's coming. When we see a hurricane coming, one, we are already prepared for what it's going to be like when it happens. Two, we can also start preparing ahead of time by, getting different resources, getting, our windows boarded up, getting prepared for this event that's going to happen. Now, what if we had no technology? Imagine what it would be like in the past when others had to literally go through a hurricane with no pre-warning. It might look like a storm at first, but then it picks up in intensity, and while we're going through it, we have no clue what's happening. All we're doing is riding the wave. So that's pretty much what's happening right now, and we could see it manifesting all around the world around us. But if we don't know what's happening, it just looks like the world is in chaos. Ultimately, it's basically there's a lot of energy that's being transmitted right now, and the way we process that energy determines how we respond. So we'll either respond with more compassion, or we'll respond with more fear, or we kind of get put in this in-between state where we're moving from one to the other. Ultimately, everybody's moving through this. It's like, if you kind of look at this analogy of being underwater, right? At the top of the water level, you can see the sun. You go about 50 feet down, you could still see light up at the top. But the further and further down that we go, the darker and darker it gets. If you go all the way down there, it's black. It's pitch black. There's no light. Even the fish down there have they have bioluminescent fish that actually create their own light so they can see. So if we have people that are at all these different elevations in the water, some are at the very bottom, some are at the very top, and then everybody else is kind of spread out between the middle and the top, right? If everybody is moving up, well, those that were at 50 feet or at 40, 30, 20, they're going up to the surface. The ones that are in the middle are rising higher. The ones at the bottom rising up. You get the point here. So look at this as being basically like a scale of our vibration or our love. At the very bottom, there's no feeling of love. We're completely stuck in the mind, using the mind to determine all of our decisions. We're not thinking about anything from compassion. We're just like logic, everything, whatever makes sense. We create a society that's very similar to what we're experiencing right now. As we go further up, we start going from a grade of no love to more love. And in this process, let's say, for instance, one of the biggest concerns is that most people have been what they call asleep. There's this whole terminology going around about waking up, waking up, waking up, and what does it mean? And it's really just a matter of awareness. For me, let's say 10 years ago, my only concern in life was basically just having fun, enjoying life, right? There was no concern about progress or who I was, or what was going on, what's going on beyond here, and so on and so forth. There was no inquisitive mind in terms of that at that time. So I was pretty content with my life. I mean, sure, I wasn't happy, but at that time I felt that everybody felt the same way. It's like, okay, this is just life. We just have to deal with it. But as I started to become more inquisitive and I started to question things that are going on, I started to see more. And as I started to see more, I started to become angry. I became less complacent and more angry. That had its own manifestation, a lot of experiences that came out of it. But the thing is, I kept questioning, kept asking, keep going further and further. And what ends up happening is you end up going beyond this point of anger to a point of understanding. Then you go to a point of compassion, love, like living everything from that perspective. And then when we transcend that, we get to a level of understanding that understands both aspects. Like I said before, it's like once you're getting out of fear or moving out of fear, you start getting this understanding of knowing why you feel the way that you do. And you stop making the decisions to live in fear and you start making more loving decisions. That transcends you into wanting to create more of a positive experience. Then once you go beyond that, you'll have the understanding of seeing the positive and the negative and seeing how they're both necessary and how they're both valid in this process. So this whole transition is basically like going from the bottom of the sea up to the very top. And when we look around the world now, we can see there's a lot of people that are actually doing positive things and trying to help. But then again, there's also those that still have, what's the word I'm looking for? Trying to push their own agendas and trying to run things the way that they used to be run in the past. And it's not working anymore. Because what's happening is those that used to be okay with it and just figured that's just how life is, they're starting to see more now and starting to question more, and that pisses people off. So when we look around the world, we start to see a lot of people standing up for what they believe is right, and we see that through a lot of politics right now. And then you also have those that are being shooken up and don't know what to do. And out of anger and frustration, they're doing, horrendous acts. We hear about shootings all the time now, and we're trying to fix it using the same old ideology of let's put restrictions. Let's say, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, but none of that stuff matters. If someone's upset, they're feeling upset. They're going to find some way to express it. It doesn't matter if you say, oh, I'm going to cut off your hand. Well, I have another hand. I'll cut off your other hand. I have feet. They're going to find some way to express themselves. So it's good that we're being mindful of these actions and that we want to be proactive and make changes, but their changes are never through restricting and saying no, no, no. Einstein once said that a problem cannot be corrected by the same level of consciousness that created it. We actually have to have a consciousness shift. And that's what's happening right now. I mean, this is all part of the process. And that's one thing we have to keep in mind. It's like, yes, I know a lot of this stuff is happening around the world, but everything is perfect as it is. We're only seeing chapter 12 of this book, but the book has already been written. In chapter 20, chapter 25, things are very, very different. But we have to get there first. We just don't jump past everything. So the only thing we can really do is just try to be examples in this experience, because a lot of us don't know what's going on or how to move forward. And it's really as simple as saying, I won't live the way that I used to, and I'm just going to focus on those things that are most beneficial for me and for everyone else. But our old habits make that decision difficult. Think about this for a sec. A can of soda has soda and carbonation in it, right? Every time we shake that can, more fizz comes to the top. Shake the can some more fizz. Shake the can some more fizz. Eventually, you're going to shake the can and there's no more carbonation that's coming up. This transitionary phase that we're going through right now is basically like shaking a can of soda, right? If we know that the can is being shooken, we are aware that, hey, eventually there's not going to be any more carbonation coming up. So, okay, we're dealing with it right now. Let's just get through it. Another way to look at it is if you don't know what's going on is all of this fizz just keeps coming up. It just keeps coming up. It just keeps coming up. That fizz that's being released, that carbonation, is pretty much our attachments. It's our attachments to their old way of living. So some of us are willingly letting go of those attachments, and we are transcending and moving at a much easier pace. We're still dealing with some misery here and there, but we're learning to work through it. Whereas some are still holding on with dear life to the old way that they're experiencing misery through this entire thing. It's like everyone is moving together. Some of us are being pulled, kicking and screaming, dragging on the ground, while others are just turning around and walking and saying, hey, let's go ahead and go this way. Everybody's still going. You know, we make the decision as to how we experience it. So kind of think about it this way. You know, if you're standing on the ground and you have a rubber band that's attached to your leg and the other end of that rubber band is attached to the ground, if someone strapped you in a harness and started pulling you up, that tension on the band is going to get stronger and stronger and stronger, and that's going to translate into pain in your leg. Now, you have one of two choices at this point. The obvious one in this situation would be just cut the band off, right? It's like, just cut it. There'd be no more resistance. You're going to be moving anyway. But if we're not aware of that band, all we're going to do is feel that pain until it finally snaps, and we have the experience of it snapping. And then after we come out of it, then we realize, oh, that's why it happened. Hopefully. But it doesn't have to be difficult. So I wanted to put this video together, kind of show or put things a little more into perspective in a way that others can actually see, as opposed to just verbal communication, because interpretations, you know, whatever, anybody can interpret anything anyway. What I would like to discuss to get into this is a difference between what we call linear progression and logarithmic progression. It's a little bit of math, but you know, it's very simple stuff, right? It's just two different curves. Like, for humans, we grew up with this mentality of 1 + 1 is 2, 2 + 1 is 3, 3 + 1 is 4. Basically, 1 is our starting point. And it's not just for math, it's for everything in general. You know, we look at everything from the perspective of my individual relationship to the ever-expanding universe around me. I am 1, therefore everything else outside of me is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. And it creates a mentality based on that. An easy way to think about it, it's... Here's a good analogy. Let's say you're reading a school textbook, right? And this school textbook has 20 chapters in it, and you're assigned to read one chapter. So you read chapter 1, you get through the pages, and you look at it, and it's like, okay, so chapter 1 just took me 10 minutes to read, or 15, let's say 10 minutes, keep the numbers even. 10 minutes to read, okay? So at this rate, if I read chapter 1 at 10 minutes, and I multiply that across 20 chapters, then that would mean I can do all 20 chapters, or the whole book, in 200 minutes, right? Makes sense. That's what I mean by 1 + 1 = 2. It's considered a linear scale. So if we look at this on a graph, right? So here's your graph, right? So 1 + 1, right? So we'll go to 1 to 1. 1 + 1 is 2, so we'll go to 2. 2 + 1 is 3, so we'll go to 3. 3 plus 1 is 4, so on and so forth. And you can start seeing how basically this creates what we call a linear graph, a linear scale. And this is that whole perception of looking at the book as, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, so on and so forth. And this actually hinders a lot of our thought processes too. So remember that, because when we're thinking in our own mind of how long it takes for us to learn something, we could think the exact same way and easily create misery in our progress. But nature doesn't work this way. Creation doesn't work this way. This is a rule set that we created as a species, as a civilization, based off of our reflection of our perception of reality. Now, if we look at what nature actually does, creation, it's very, very different. Very different. Everything works synergistically.
Synergy simply means that the individual pieces work together as a complete unit. So for instance, if a piece of wood can hold 50 pounds, logically we would think that two of them together would hold 100 pounds. This is the idea of looking at things from its individual components. Synergistically, however, if we combine those two pieces of wood together, they would hold more than their sum total of 100 pounds.
There's something out there called the Fibonacci sequence. And the Fibonacci sequence is basically a series of numbers that come out of nature. Now, let me show you. For instance, okay, let's do this in Word. This might actually be easier here. Or Excel, whichever. Okay, so the Fibonacci sequence basically works like this. You're taking the last number and you're adding it to the next number. So in this case, 1 plus 1 equals 2, right? Now 2 plus 1, which is the previous number, equals 3. Now 3 plus 2 equals 5. Let me change the numbers in a different direction so it makes more sense, okay? All right, so let's look at it that way. Now, the next line would be 3 plus 5 equals 8. So basically, we keep going in this sequence now, right? So 5 plus 8, 9, 8, 9, 13, 8 plus 13 equals 21, so on and so forth. Now, this is basically your Fibonacci sequence. 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. And this number keeps going up exponentially. And what you'll notice is the difference between each number also grows. So 2 to 3 in this case is a difference of 1. 3 to 5 is a difference of 2. 8 to 5 is a difference of 3, and so on and so forth. So this number starts to increase exponentially as it becomes larger and larger. I mean, you can see once it starts getting into the hundreds, the expansion itself, the difference between the numbers gets pretty great. So this is how nature works, and kind of shows an example of what I mean. Here are some ideas of, where are you at? Fibonacci sequence in nature, okay? The nautilus shell. This is a very, very common interpretation of it. You can see as it's growing, the spiral is much tighter at the middle, but as it continues to go out, the ratio gets larger and larger and larger, right? We can see it in a pine cone. Pine cone goes the exact same way. Here's a rose showing the exact same thing. This is the Fibonacci sequence basically mapped into a spiral. I mean, the golden mean spiral is a little different, but the numbers are pretty much almost right on. So here's a picture of an egg. Here's a hurricane. We're all very familiar with this one. Hurricane, tornadoes. The ear. You can also see trees. If you ever look at, not just trees, all plants. 1 + 1 is 2. 2 + 1 is 3. 3 + 5. 3 + 2 is 5. And go out there, go look at plants. You'll see this in all of them. It's just how everything's created. Here's a wave. The wave itself is also going to follow the same spiral. You know, we can keep going on, and hey, look, even our president's hair follows the spiral. So this is basically how nature creates. Now, if we look at nature and we plot this on a graph, right? So let's undo that. And if we go back to the Fibonacci sequence, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. So let's go 2, right? 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. I can't even count right now. No, 5, 8, 13, 21. I'm gonna get it, don't worry. 8, 13. Okay, so 21. Where's 21? That's a lot of lines. Okay. So now what we will start to see is that I cannot click on stuff because this is in the way. Oh, my arrow was off. So let's do here to here, here to here, here to here. Now, we can't really see that big of a grade here, just because we're still dealing with like the first set of numbers. But if you keep going over time, this is different. This is the difference. A linear graph will show it like this. This is your scale and progression. A logarithmic path is going to show it like this. It's going to go straight up like this. So if we look at just what's happened over the past 2,000 years, right? We've had progression in our civilization between, 0 AD and 1000 AD. Then we had progression between 1000 and 2000. But look at how much significant progress has happened. I mean, just in 100 years, we went from horse and buggy to launching satellites and rockets into space, right? So when we look at it that way, this is time before. And then this is time after, time after, time after, and this is like where we're at right now. And we can see that it's just going to increase. It's going to continue to increase exponentially. Things are not going to plateau or go down or anything. It's what we're experiencing, what we're going through right now is going to continue, and it's going to increase exponentially. So the question now becomes, what are you going to do with this? This is energy. So we can use it to complain and tell people you need to fix this, or, point fingers and blame, play the blame game. Or we can say, you know what, I'm going to do something different. Because again, this is just an increase in energy as we see here. It's an increase in energy. So where do you want to direct that energy? And this is what's really, really cool. So looking at this logarithmically, let's take what I'm going through for an example. Learning a bunch of different things like singing, dancing, and writing music and so on and so forth, right? I'm pretty much right here with this. Well, maybe like right here now, or to here. Going through this progress, or going through this process, the more that I do it, it's not like, okay, so if I was doing this well last month and I'm doing this well this month, then next month I'll be doing this well next month. And, after a few years, I should be able to be like this, right? I should be up here in a few years. Now, if we stick to that belief system and we believe that that's going to happen, we create this experience inside this experience. And that's where all of the frustration and all of the mix up in energy and everything that is happening right now. Because many of us are trying to keep this straight line going because it's how we think. We believe that this is how life is. But life is, as we say, throwing a curveball. And now what is happening is we're being forced to change the way we look at things. So if we start something new, what ends up happening is the more energy we put into it, the more energy, eventually we start to get better and things start to catch fire and we get better and better and better and better and better and we start going up. It doesn't have to take you 10 years to do something just because somebody else did. You can do it in a year. You can do it in less than a year. It's all based on your belief. What do you think you're capable of? You know, ultimately, you already are everything. All you're doing in every moment is just remembering how to do stuff that's already part of your being. This is all energy, and it's going to continue to increase exponentially. So the question then becomes, how do we use it? You know, are we going to continue doing the same old things and trying to hold on to the old ways that didn't work before? You know, that perspective created a very destructive environment. Or we can use it to build. What are we going to do?